posted that video if you go through, and also another two videos I have posted in the group related to scripting of nation and the role of nation in the face of globalization. Okay, so you go through these videos, two videos, YouTube videos that I have extracted from that NPTEL portal. So that Anjali raised videos that those lectures were very important. So you go through those lectures, and apart from that, whatever I have discussed related to evolution of the state is also very important. You need to understand how state has been evolved over the years. Okay, so today we are going to focus on nationalism, and that too, yeah. I just had one doubt. You told us about one assignment, right? I'm not going to discuss about assignment today. No, no. I'll keeping it for later. Huh? Not like if it's okay, then whenever you have time, can you upload the assignment in Google Class? Like what we have to do. If whenever it is already uploaded. Yeah, it is uploaded. Okay. Okay. So yeah. So we are going to discuss about nationalism and what is nationalism, the different facets of nationalism. Part of it I have already discussed in the very first semester class, if you could remember. And today again we will look into some of the facets and image of nationalism of India, of our land, as well as China, and बंद कर दो फैन बंद कर दो हाँ if it is not required, it's not that hot also, no? Okay then. See, there are four kind of nationalism in the last class we have actually discussed about, right? So four kind of nationalism. Four kinds are like we have that civic nationalism, we have individual nationalism, we have ethnic nationalism, and collective form of nationalism. And these forms of and variants of nationalism can also at times you see overlap and come in amalgamations or in combinations. Like we can get to see individuals and collective form of nationalism in many countries, and civic and ethnic form of nationalism also get to be seen in many countries, many states. So when we actually see this nationalism, this sentiment, it is basically a sentiment to bring that solidarity, right? Can you please tell the four types again? Yeah, I'll write it down. Okay. I'll write it down. So when you talk about this, the sentiment of nationalism, it is all about bringing the solidarity among the masses, and that can be based on that primordial ties, that caste, gender, and that common history, common subjugations, that humiliations, that can be of variety factors, right? So, before I'll pinpoint about these variants on these types of nationalism, again we will look into this American nationalism, and you see this Chinese nationalism. American nationalism is a variant of individual, collective, and civic kind of nationalism. So, three strands of nationalism get to be seen in American nationalism, and one is civic kind of nationalism. Civic nationalism basically entails the role of individual or self above the community, above the nation. That is a kind of civic version of nationalism. So America have been adopted liberal democracy. In that way, we get to see that civic sense of nationalism, which is equivalent to even the individualistic version of nationalism, which gives a primacy to individual rights, like human rights is one kind of like individualistic nationalism, when you give primacy to human rights, when you give primacy to equality, liberty, justice. So these are some of the concepts which I actually highlighted in this individualistic version of nationalism. But you see, these two versions are quite similar. At the same time, we also have a collectivist version of nationalism, or you say a collective nationalism. Collective nationalism will give primacy to community over the individual. And we also get to see the primacy of community over the individual, that kind of brand get to see, or tendency is also seen in USA. Okay, even in China, even in India. Okay, so you get to study two, three variants at a time of nationalism in one particular country, in one nation. So when we talk about the Chinese nationalism, we get to discuss in the last class that the Chinese nationalism is full of nativism, is of a variant of nativism, then in pragmatism. These are some of the, you say, brilliant qualities of nationalism, like a nativism is one character. Then you see the pragmatism is one character, alter nationalist is one character, and you see this anti-traditionalist one character. So you'll get to see this variant will help you to seek answer to any kind of questions regarding this growth of Chinese state, the strategies they have adopting while taking into the mixed planning, or even their pro to this liberal policy or democracy. So all this kind of question will also be made out or mitigated by studying this variant of like you say cult of or character of nationalism. When you talk about the pragmatism, now it is very like available or prevail cult in China. Earlier we get to see nativism dominated the Chinese tendency. Nativism, when they actually when Chinese people and basically the intellectual as well as politicians, they believe much in their own civilization and the culture. Now also they still believe in their culture and the civilization, but still they also adopt an anti-traditionalist approach in order to rise above other nations. And as I have already told you, that China has a history of 5,000 years humiliation, and humiliation by America, by Japan. So 5,000 years humiliation by USA and Japan has helped them even to carve out a nationalistic tendency, which lies in nativism, which lies in pragmatism, which lies in even like anti-traditionalist cult. Ultimately, they want to rise above all other nations, all other country, and want to prove them that okay, they are not supposed to be live behind that that ridiculed. They are not supposed to be humiliated, and they are the nation which can even rule the entire world. So that is their tendency, and based on that they have adopted the dualism. And as I've already told you, the Chinese are highly optimistic, like pessimism and optimism, this dual kind of character get to be seen in the politicians, among even intellectuals. And by harboring that kind of tendency, they are taking some strategies to rule the nations. When you talk about this US nationalism, it is important because most of the time we are the followers of USA, and every time we try to follow the Western culture. And there is also a cult, you might heard about this Orientalism and Occident. So you also need to understand the US nationalism, and how subaltern we are in that aspect, in terms of understanding the US nationalism. So it is overpowering. That nationalism has overpowering the whole world, the whole country. US nationalism has actually overpowered the whole world, you see, because their tenets are different, their facets of nationalism are different. One facet is securitization, another one is militarism, another facet is universalization, and the fourth facet of nationalism, US nationalism, is I will write down, that is humanitarian intervention. So these are the facets of US nationalism, which we get to see in its practical approach also. I'll write it down. So first one is, you see, universalization, because US believe universalization of the US values, US norms. So you need to understand what is US norms. US norms is related to right, liberty, human rights, and justice, democracy. So basically the democracy, liberal democracy, is the US norm. It is not, they won't advocate for a people's democracy. They'll advocate for liberal democracy or liberalism. So liberalism is the value and the culture and the norm which US want to prevail across the world, in all the countries, across all the countries. Okay, so that is there in the personification of US nationalism, that US try to universalize their values, their norms across the world. And the rock state which are there, like Korea is a rock state, and also communist state are supposed to be contained, supposed to be deterred through certain technique like preemptive war, preventive war. These are various techniques and strategies adopted by US in order to in order to contain those ideology of communism, ideology of anti-liberal sentiment, ideology based on anti-liberal sentiment. So, hence, in order to universalize the values, what US has done is adopting a strategy of securitization and militarism. Militarism is two strategy. One is that it is nationalism, two strategy, militarism and securitization somehow go parallel. As you could see that when you talk about this militarism, the importance of it raised during 9/11 incident when the US actually launched a war against terror, and that was become a kind of civilizational war US has created. Civilizational war, and interesting part of it can also be studied in respect to India, because how it has affected Indian consciousness is very interesting. Okay, that civilizational war dimension where Huntington has said there are two civilizations, that Christian and the Muslim. So that war has continued like that, and that actually came in after post 9/11 incident, that militarism has also came in, and without even getting any acknowledgement or even permission, legitimate permission from UN. They started war against even this Iraq. And you see that is also part of securitization strategy, that they want to create and secure the sovereignty of this UN, secure the integrity of these nations, and also what it did, without even finding any kind of weapon of mass destruction, it launched war against Iraq. Without even, come. So that is a part of militarism and securitization strategy. It is going parallelly. So militarism ultimately, because it has increases expenditure on defense. So it's more than like a billion. I forgot the statistics. How many billions you could also get to find spent on the defense in order to in order to safeguard the nation in the name of safeguarding this country, that safeguarding the US, that continent. Okay. So that is one thing that militaristic approach. At the same time, you also see securitization. When you talk about the securitization, it is related to US, US. Um, Denouncing of some of the very important enactment, like is a Kyoto Protocol. Kyoto Protocol was denounced by US. At the same time, you see this biotechnical technical weapon convention was also denounced by US. Okay, US also denounced the international ICC, International Criminal Court, because it was not in favor of US universalistic that tendency. Okay, hence it has denounced all this kind of enactment at the same time, and that is one kind of strategy related to securitization. They wanted to they heighten the security aspect of the nation, and in order to heighten the security aspect, they will develop the arm and this the immunities and arsenal more and more, and at the same time preventing other nations in a non-nuclear state not to have the chance to become a nuclear state. So these are some of the strategy US has been adopting over the years in the name of securitization. And humanitarian intervention that came in, that is a recent development that came in 2005. In 2005, we get to see this phenomenon humanitarian intervention. So, in the name of restoring the democracy, in the name of restoring the you see normal order in a nation which was terrorized by anarchic regime or military coup. So, US itself has taken the power to even go and intervene in the internal affairs of that region. Internal affairs that was actually being criticized most of the time, humanitarian intervention might lead to intervention in the internal affairs, and it did happen. But US made it happen through the acknowledgement of even you see acknowledgement of United Nations. So humanitarian intervention has been carried out in most of the African nations, in when you see Somalia, in Bosnia, in Uganda, in Romania. So in African countries, and due to military coup, there is extreme anarchy and there is no right ensured among the populations. So UN also permitted the US to go for humanitarian interventions and establish a regime of human rights. So basically, US said that we are establishing a regime of human rights through humanitarian intervention, but at the same time, they are also intervening into the internal affairs of this country and sovereignty. So, but that is another, you say, another facets of nationalism, humanitarian intervention. So, any kind of conflict occur, US go and intervene in the name of humanitarian interventions. So that US is the one who will provide the solution to any kind of conflict anywhere across the world. Okay, so this is a kind of principle which determine their nationalism, the character of US nationalism. Now, if you look at this Indian version of nationalism, it is a bit different. So you all know about this history of nationalism in India, but here, our nationalism is like amalgamation of or integral part of like religion, regionalism, as well as you see that language. So our that nationalistic sentiment is based around this linguistic nationalism. Okay, again that is a part of ethnic nationalism. Our nationalism is ethnic nationalism, not individual sense of nationalism, and our nationalism is collective form of nationalism. So in the very first, I have discussed about four variants of nationalism. One is civic, another one. So civic form of nationalism is there. So where does individual take precedence of the state, of the community, so that individual's right, individual self, not only about the right. So it's all about individualism. Basically, when we talk about the individualism, we get to hold this perspective of right, right? So when we talk about the civic sense basically give primacy to self above the community. At the same time, we talk about this collective form of nationalism in the very first, as we have discussed about the collective form of nationalism, you are giving the primacy to community over the individual, primacy to community over the individual, and the individualistic dimension is very, very different, individualistic perspective of the nationalism. So in India, we won't get to see this individualistic perspective of nationalism. We get to see a collective dimension as well as ethnic dimension. Ethnic dimension where nationalism is based on those primordial identities and ascriptive identities. Okay, the sentiment of nationalism that I am a part of the nation. When I say what holds that nationalistic sentiment, what holds nationalism, and how will you define nationalism? It is very, very important. How will you define nationalism? Means making myself or making ourselves a part of the nation is a kind of nationalistic sentiment. That belongingness, that collective belongingness, and that came from different strategies. Strategy might be varying strategy, and factors are also different. Strategy and factors are two different components to understand the nationalism. When you talk about factors of the rise of nationalism will be different. You have to discuss some of the factors and basically the political environment during that period of time, which will help you to understand the rise of nationalism. Okay, but when you talk about the strategy to create that nationalistic sentiment will be different. So there are different strategies which are also adopted by the Indian mass during that period of time to have that nationalistic sentiment. Even later on also it continued. You get to understand those strategies. Like I'm going to discuss about it, so to help you to understand. Yeah. Individual nationalism, can you please? Individualistic nationalism actually based on the ideas of liberal democracy, human rights, justice, equality. These are individualistic form of liberal. They actually emphasize on values, certain values, and values that actually stem from liberal country than US. US is a kind of individualistic nationalism. We are social welfare democracy. Yeah, it's a social welfare democracy. That concept was there. So these are constitutional values. It's in constitution, but not in actually we practice this. But we cannot even say that we haven't practiced it. Even in terms of nationalism, we don't. It does not reflect in our nationalism. Yeah, it doesn't reflect in our nationalism because our nationalism is actually factored by the religion. So unfortunately or fortunately, it is factored by the religion, and also that descriptive identities. So whatever you say, caste, you say language, you say like that ethnicity. So that has factored the nationalism. So our nationalism is basically ethnic version of nationalism, as ethnic as well as collective version. Like so, if you were to compare the nationalism during the post-colonial struggle, during the colonial struggle, not post-colonial struggle, and now it has changed a lot. Like the nationalism during the freedom struggle and current nationalism, it has changed a lot in terms of dimension. I am asking. What are the changes? Okay. Like it has changed, no. Like that, at that time, it was not much of ethnic. It was more of collective nationalism because during the struggle, colonial struggle for independence. You cannot even say that we have a sea change in this nationalism, in the dimension of the nationalism. You cannot even say. But for that, you need to understand the factors at that point of time. We talk about the colonialism. So how it has actually, perpetuated deep down into the minds of the people and has and has helped to culminate this nationalistic movement in India. So when we actually talk about these factors which dominated the nationalism during the British era, you will get to see. You talk about the Mahatma Gandhi, that leadership cult was there. Now also we have a leadership cult. So we focus on the leadership side, leadership cult while understanding the nationalism. Talk about Mahatma Gandhi, that was at that period of time he emerged. Right, in 15, when he actually came to India after he served South Africa for 20 years, he traveled and he toured across the India. He understood the deficiencies of India, deficiencies that Indian population are living with. And he also found that there was not a political organization, although Congress was established. And in the earlier class I have discussed, in the last class I have discussed about importance of political organization in order to form a nation state. But till then we did not have a nation state status. India was not a nation state. So nationalism came first in order to establish a nation state. Political organization was also established in the form of Congress. But Congress was not a mass organization till 1915. It was not at all a mass organization. It was simply dominated. It was simply an organization of elite dominated by that armchair politicians, intellectuals, urban elite. Okay, so it got a mass base after this non-cooperation movement. So that Congress got a mass base after non-cooperation movement, and you see in non-cooperation movement we actually see Hindu-Muslim unity. Forging that Hindu-Muslim unity was one of the strategy that Gandhi adopted, because we say non-cooperation Khilafat movement that came together, no? So Gandhiji actually understood the deficiencies. Deficiencies was that this leader were not in touch with the people, and hence he made it a point that he will go door to door and also make it a mass-based movement. And accordingly, he first started with the satyagraha. He first started with satyagraha, non-violence. These are some of the principles you need to understand while interpreting the national interest of India. Now also it is continuing. So although it is still in the hindsight, but these are some of the soft power we are still using and adopting to showcase our nation, and showcase our culture, showcase our tradition, to showcase our primacy, national primacy. Okay, so we get to see that Gandhi is, it's very very important to understand. I'm going to answer what he has asked me, whether it has changed, drastically changed the kind of nationalism we had earlier and the kind of nationalism we have now. So there is no drastic change. First, the factors which actually lead to nationalism was a leadership, a style type of Mahatma Gandhi, under whose supervision that freedom struggle was carried out. Right, and Satyagraha was one, and non-violence, he was the principal, and non-cooperation movement. You actually see non-cooperation was in line with the Khilafat movement. Khilafat movement was actually, it was triggered, it was carried out by Ali brothers in against the British rule for giving a pursuing a kind of denigration to this Turkey empire, and that sentiment has taken by Mahatma Gandhi in order to foster the Hindu-Muslim unity. So in that way, his role was very humanitarian and moral. He said that we will also take a help of that community. At the same time, when you are talking about the religion, which is still there, it is still a dominant factor at that point of time. religion was still a dominant factor, caste was still a dominant factor. When you talk about the civil disobedience movement of this nationalism, Indian nationalism, when you actually study the factors, you need to discuss about this non-cooperation and civil disobedience movement. And civil disobedience movement idea was not moved by its was not like even conceived by its and every segment of the population of India at that point of time. So that was kind of abstract idea for those who are downtrodden, who are depressed class. They did not support, they were untouchable, they did not even support for civil disobedience. And because of because of the kind of attitude they receive, kind of like that you see that you might also say attitude and also behavior they actually got to see from Congress. At that point of time, Congress did not want to offend the Sanatanis, and hence Congress also did not like help them to even mobilize that depressed class. And it was Ambedkar in 1930 mobilized that depressed sections and demanded for a separate electorate for depressed sections and untouchables. Untouchability was still there. Okay, so you get to see that civil disobedience was not even carried by each and every group and social group in India during that period of time. At the same time, at that point of time, even before that, 1921, you will get to see by then there is a Sisyphus or breakage among the Hindu-Muslim cult in Congress, because Congress demanded separate electorate. Muhammad Ali Jinnah demanded separate electorate, and he even refused to he agreed to shy away from the demand for separate electorate if Muslim community is represented in the legislative assembly, and proportional representation is granted to the Muslim community in the legislative assembly, uh, and that is proportional to the population in Muslim provinces. Okay, but that was also not granted, and that actually led to the creation of this partition, because they demanded for a separate representation, or that means reservation of like seat in legislative assembly in Muslim dominated provinces. And that was one region which was not accepted. But you see, if you look at the personality cult, Gandhi's personality, Jinnah's personality, at that point of time there are different personality came up. Vallabhbhai Patel is one, Jawaharlal Nehru. So they do have different kind of ideology which actually help to understand the Indian nationalist movement. Okay, because Jinnah's personality, Jinnah was elite. He was basically elite. He did not think for a Muslim mass. He think only for Muslim elite. He did not think about distribution of this wealth among the masses. But there is also rich poor division among the Muslim. And also you get to see that in UP, basically Muslim community dominated that UP regions, and they also after partition they went to that Pakistan, and in a way they lose the Indian citizenship. Okay, now that is again taken by you see Sangh Parivar and now RSS, because they are the one they have they have they have given precedence to their community sentiment and religious sentiment over a nation, like that way. So, so this is important to understand it. So, Khilafat, that kind of sentiment against the British government among the Muslim was used sort of, or used on the humanitarian ground and moral ground by Mahatma Gandhi, and fostered Hindu-Muslim unity. So, non-cooperation was a huge success at that period of time. It was a success. Non-cooperation was a successful event, and again, we also see along with non-cooperation, we get to see the success of traditional movement. Right, so there was a boycott of even the legislative assembly, boycott of court by the lawyer, and setting up own tribunal, and boycott of school, college, and also prohibiting the liquor shop. So these are the agendas that dominated at that point of time. And also you see the kind of that consciousness that people have, that mass consciousness, when people realize that they can endure hardship, and they can do anything to create a defiance or challenged the British rule, and yeah, that kind of consciousness helped them to mobilize against the British. Okay, so it is important to understand, these very factors like non-cooperation is very important role. Non-cooperation has an important role. Not cooperating with this government, huh, not cooperating in government, and that too in a non-violent way, in peaceful way. Not cooperating with government. Even when we talk about this movement, we need to talk about this. You need to know about this Rowlatt Act. Rowlatt Act and Jallianwala Bagh, that massacre. That is a massacre. It actually it was. That it was a protest against that Rowlatt Act, that like why this massacre had happened. You might know about that incident because India under Gandhi, India at that point of time was looking for Purna Swaraj. Okay, but it was not even given. So Montego Chelmsford that rule came, and government of India came in 1919, and meanwhile it was India was given only the hierarchy, but our claim for Purna Swaraj was not even granted, and that lead to even that Rowlatt Act also come, and there were public meeting across all over India, across India, and people of Punjab and Amritsar also they were gathered, and basically the women, children, and the old citizen, old the senior one, that old person gathered here, more than 2,000, 3,000 people gathered at that public meeting, and that place, you say, I went there this time. I went there. I saw it was also encircled by building, and there is a narrow passage. There was no exit path. There was no exit, very narrow path, and meeting was very peaceful. Very peaceful meeting. The time was during the Lori time, because during 13 April was the yeah, sorry, 13 April. 13 April was there, 13 April 1990, right? So that was the day during Loki time only, right? So people gathered, and General Dyer actually around and fired around 1600 rounds firing was done, and thousands were killed, and around 2,000 left unattended, injured. Okay, so that was that was a kind of lot to our huh? Peaceful uprising. That is a peaceful uprising. So at the same time, these are commented the sentiment. Okay, and this time we have seen that well also, where people jumped there. So it was barricaded in that way. So like a glass house, it was made of glass. So I have seen that. I thought of making a post also, and I did not find time to write. So I was thinking that I'll make a post into Facebook writing about my experience. I did not get time to even write those sentences. So, now also what they do, they is to play the song, the patriotic song throughout day and the night. So if you go and visit that Jalwan, you will have that patriotic sentiment now also, because all the songs are still played. That patriotic song. So may name one or two. They used to be playing those songs, and those walls where you get to see those bullets, bullet-rested walls are there. So you see, that was one incident. Jallianwala Bagh was incident that also fomented the spirit of nationalism. Okay, so you see, that is another factor behind the Indian nationalism, and we get to see civil disobedience. When you say civil disobedience basically it is related to breaking the law. So non-cooperation was not related to breaking the law, not cooperating with what government is doing. But when we are talking about civil disobedience, here um, um, along with combining the non-cooperation, that Indian mass also broke the salt law, breaking the law. That is, break at that point of time, breaking the law. They broke the salt law. They even refused to pay the land revenue to British. So and they also, and Dundee March was carried out. The barefoot went to Dundee, the seashore, and salt law was broken, and also Gandhi sought a path that salt can also be uh, collected from the sea they themselves. So that was another incident which has actually factored the Indian nationalism. Now you see, when you say Indian nationalism, when you discuss about non-cooperation, you talk about Savisora incident. So Gandhiji tried to create a mass base, and he has consolidated the sentiment of tribals, Harijans, and Kishan, landless laborers, as well as industrialists. So in that way, he has created that mass base. No? So this movement is actually known as a subaltern movement. We have to have a subaltern perspective. So when we talk about Indian nationalism, this is a along with the ethnicity, another dimension of Indian nationalism is subaltern. Subaltern, when we say subaltern, perhaps I have not discussed about subaltern yet. So this is a perspective which is popularized in India by the writings of Ranajit Guha. Have you read Ranajit Guha? Dr. Ranajit Guha, he is actually a Maoist. Okay, Dr. Ranajit Guha's writing, so he and also he even Partha Chatterjee's writing, and you can see Sumit Sarkar is one. Hmm. Then um, Syed Amin, Syed Amin's writing, we get to find a subaltern aspect of to understand the Indian version of nationalism. That means that history is not yet finished, and history is dominated by the elite literature, elite writers, and people from the depressed section has not created the history just because they could not even articulate their their fears, their problems, their difficulties, and hence so whatever we are reading, no, we are reading the history which is written by the elite, their sentiment, their perspective, their opinions, their expressions. Okay, so their difficulties and the problems. So history is not from the point of view of below. So they that is a subaltern perspective. Yeah. Just now, that is subaltern. Right? Subaltern. Subaltern is also another perspective of Indian nationalism, which is not studied yet. It is not studied yet. In the post-colonial narrative, we get to see subaltern studies now, but it is reflected because when we study the condition of any state, any nation, any situation, we study it from post-colonial narratives. So there is also the issue of colonialism. Subaltern school of thought came during the 1980s. The 1980s, but at the same time, you get to see the subaltern
It was highly ignored during
came during Antonio Gramsci's time because he actually introduced the subaltern perspective. He was a Marxist. He spoke in favor of this in favor of the peasant community, agricultural community of this Italy, and tried to mobilize them by in view of the subaltern perspective. Subaltern,
what is
basically, that's speaking from the below,
in
subaltern.
the community, like I remember even in feminism, subaltern issues like subaltern issues of India, Africa, post-colonialism are ignored because it was
People from the below. So people from the below, from the oppressed sections, subaltern.
okay. So those groups of people are called subaltern.
Those not good. That is a perspective actually. Okay, let me tell you, those are that constitute subaltern people. So we talk about Harijan now. Even here come the minority communities. They are subaltern. Minority just in view of the majority. Why they are called minority in view of the majority? Their demands and their claims are not articulated properly, are not represented properly, and that's why a community is called minority community, right? And that community may be on the basis of religion, Muslim community, again becoming subaltern. That is what that a caste, any caste can become a subaltern. Any ethnicity, they can claim themselves to be subaltern. So it is basically a perspective. Let me tell you that it is a perspective which has also characterized Indian nationalism, and we get to see that perspective even understanding Gandhi's effort to mobilize the mass. Gandhi's effort to mobilize the mass and trying to give a mass base to this movement, nationalistic movement, has involved a subaltern perspective, because he is the one, he tried to, write history for them, but at the same time Gandhi is also elite. But it is very, very important to create history for them and history by them. Okay, so history for those downtrodden, history by those downtrodden, in order to highlight their practices, their craft, their sentiments, their difficulties, problems, etc. So that is a subaltern perspective. So that is another variant we get to see in Indian nationalism. And can you be key track Adivasi people? Yeah, subaltern Adivasi people. So Gayatri's fiber, Chakraborty's fiber, has also wrote a book, Can Subaltern Speak? So I think it is available online also. Can Subaltern Speak is a very beautiful, you do it, so you actually see a poetry. So even many people say that Bengali Bhadralok, now that is that concept. The Bengali Bhadralok, that concept, Bhadralok concept, they are also subaltern. Somewhere I have read. Okay, so Bhadralok concept is there, no, in Bengali, but they are elite. Somebody said that they actually constitute an elite. Huh. But people said that no, it is also a subaltern. Now they try to look at Bharat Mata from subaltern perspective. Now you see in nationalism, Bharat Mata, that concept, strategy, when you talk about the strategy of mobilization and strategy of nationalism, so one is certain factor which factored the nationalism, certain factor that characterized the nationalistic movement and what lead to nationalism in India, factor that give rise to nationalism will be different. And the kind of nationalistic movement, when we say nature of nationalistic movement, we get to see this non-cooperation, civil disobedience. These are basically characterized as nationalism. At the same time, when you say the factors, different aspects, you get to see this unification cult. First, there is a British unification. During British regime, so whole India was unified, right? So unified as a political unity, which was not the case during even Mughal regime. Okay, and earlier form of uh, ruling, we did not have a complete political unification of the country, and that has also led to nationalism. Second factor which actually led to nationalism, all you know, is English education, because English become the lingua franca, common lingua franca, and that has made common lingua franca, that has made the elite of the nation to communicate, elite of the nation who usually speak different dialects, they communicate and got a medium to even that rectification of their grievances, and also create a demand and create a claim in front of British. And that also get to see in the policies of Macaulay. Macaulay is the one. Macaulay, hence most of the time. Now you also get to see a term Macaulay Putra if you start speaking English well. So that is a terminology. It is used even to reduce us. So Macaulay Putra is a term. It's often used. So Macaulay is the one who advocated for English education in order to create a supply of clerk, in order to create smooth administration of the British, and also a supply of chief clerk. At the same time, to create a group of loyalists who will be loyal to British administration. And also a section of the people who will understand the deficiencies of even Indian system and the customs. Actually, you see that has led to Ud Despatch, and Ud Despatch has created universities, Calcutta universities, that Madras universities, and there's one more university, I forgot, three universities in London fashion. So in fashion of London style. So that we got after this Macaulay's, that policy, and English education policy. And then we get to see that English, elite of Indian, actually they got the exposure of this liberty, justice, and equality, this very kind of Western, you see, um, Western doctrines, and they imbued by it. They imbued by this freedom of will, which described by Derusu. They were also imbued by the sentiment of, like, that American during their freedom struggle, and sentiment of Britishers when they actually look for a parliamentary democracy or parliamentary government. So it has also helped them to consolidate nationalistic sentiment in them. At the same time, and they also try to these educated Indians, elite Indians, they they self-examine themselves. They try to examine themselves, and they found some of the deficiencies in the Indian system, Indian custom, help them again to consolidate nationalistic sentiment. They said that they found out some pernicious or even reprehensible social customs, and they create a reform movement. So reform movement is one factor which has also led to nationalism. That reform movement of Raja Ram Mohan Rai said Brahma Samaj was also found in order to create a reform in the society. And reform movement carried out by various newspapers, be it Indian Mirror, then the Keshri, then Amrit Bajar Patrika, the Patriot. These are the newspaper contributed to see the loopholes and lacunar drawback of the British government and British system, as well as the evil of, like, Indian social custom, and create a kind of fervor or spread a fervor of nationalism. So these are the factors contributed to the rise of nationalism in India at the same time. Okay, so it was before, like, before the birth of that leadership cult of Gandhiji, before the birth of leadership cult. So we did not have a leader at that point of time. We only have a few personalities, a few figures at that point of time help to contribute to help to contribute or the rise of nationalism at that period of time, right? So, and we also see about this Arya Samaj now, and it has a very like interesting link to understand the Hindu revivalism nowadays, and now the kind of religion-based nationalism which we have seen can also be linked to Arya revivalism. So this reform movement is based on the Hindu revivalist order. Hindu revivalists purifying this Hinduism, and purifying the Hinduism by reforming some of the reprehensible social customs like untouchability, that even this child marriage, and satida. So reforming some of the evil practices, we can get to purify the Hinduism, and that was also the principal goal of Arya Samaj. Arya Samaj was founded by Dayananda Saraswati in 1870 and started that reformist movement. In the South India, we get to see Theosophical Society, which was spearheaded by Annie Besant and Iris Reddy, who was very much influenced by the Indian culture and past tradition and the history, and tried to spread that values of Hinduism in, like, South India. And also we see Brahma Samaj is another, like, that organization was founded in order to spread this reform movement in India. So political organization, these are non-political cultural organizations, but they also contributed in creating a political sentiment, and also in unification of the nation in a way by removing this kind of evil practices. Okay, people liberalized themselves, people also educated themselves. Dayananda Anglo-Vedic College was established by Dayananda Saraswati to even help people to educate themselves about the Hindu tradition, culture, and all. So that was a kind of revivalist movement which culminated in 1870s, and the kind of revivalist movement which we get to see. You get to understand the shift in nationalism. So you see, Indian nationalism is not separated from religion. Indian nationalism is not separated from language movement and regionalism. So when you understand Indian nationalism, you need to understand the nationalism, that's religion, importance of religion, and Hindu revivalism, and importance of the presence of organization like Vishwa Hindu Parishad, RSS, and even this that Akali Dal, You talk about other fundamentalist association, yeah, fundamentalist organization, so which have formed on the base of religious identity. And let me tell you, when you study that communal dimension, again, ethnicity also need to understand the communal dimension, okay, of the nationalism. So we have that communal dimension of nationalism. So in this communal dimension of nationalism, what you get to actually see is that in communal dimension, communalism has been defined by Western scholar as a governing principle where the local groups and collectives have the right to enjoy autonomy in a federation. Right. So they view it in that way. So, but we view communalism as a aversion to secularism. Right. So our viewpoint, our perspective of communalism is different. So when you say communalism, so again it is also related to present cult of Hindu revivalism movement, right? So we say communalism, that is a kind of like attaining this autonomy by the local groups, local bodies in a federation, and also ownership of the goods and properties in a community, and committed to the sentiment, community sentiment. That is what is communalism and defined by this Western nations. So these are some of the facets of even understanding the nationalism. But when you say communalism, again it can be related to religion. Okay, it is related to religion, and here related to Hindu revival organization. So we have also Vishnu Hindu Parishad and the Ram Rajya Parishad, and also that RSS came in 1925, I guess, and Vishnu Hindu Parishad, and that also came in 1951 and beyond that. Yes, and there was a Ram Rajya Parishad came in 1948, So they want to create an Akhanda Bharat now. Their concept that their philosophy is to create an Akhanda Bharat and Hinduize the populations, and also Hinduize the Muslims, especially living in India, and Indianize the Muslim living in India. So that was their philosophy. At the same time, they can create an Akhanda Bharat based on certain principles, like you have the principles of supporting a candidate who is actually facilitating their belief of Hinduism, the Muslim, supporting a political candidate. So that is their another policy on cow slaughter, like a ban on the cow slaughter policy. That is a policy of banning the cow slaughter, and the policy of even creating creating a Sanskrit as a medium of even instruction. So that is also another kind of policies or principles they are working on in order to create an Akhanda Bharat. And when they try to create an Akhanda Bharat, their 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 pursuit is to revive the old Hindu culture, old Hindu tradition at the same time. But it is completely distinct from what was perceived by Dayananda Saraswati and Brahma Samaj. And that is the difference when you talk about the differences in terms of shift in nationalistic sentiment. Yeah, we get to see differences in the shift in nationalistic sentiment, because earlier Dayananda Saraswati founded this Arya Samaj and talked about purification of Hinduism based on removing the social evils. But here, like in Hindu revivalist cult, which we get to see today in the form of RSS, in the form of Vishwa Hindu Parishad, they also try to create Akhanda Bharat and a purification of Hindu by even trying to homogenize. The thing is that they will homogenize, let me tell you, they homogenize the population by semiticize one particular religion, and try to create a resemblance of the Christianity and the Muslim, how they have helped to create nation state in that way, and in that way they are hopeful to create a nation state because of even the paranoid factors that they are living with. They are living with a paranoia that you see that India is actually, you see, surrounded by all the Muslim countries. Like we have this Indonesia, Malaysia, we have that Pakistan, Afghanistan. So we're surrounded by Muslim, Bangladesh, so surrounded by Muslim countries and this Gulf regions which is there. And in Soviet Union also after the disintegration we get to see many Muslim countries. So we are surrounded by Muslim regions, Muslim continents. So this, which has created a paranoia among this like revivalist cult. And that's why they try to create an Akhanda Bharat based on Hinduized Muslim, the present Muslim, who are still a minority in India. Because it is also true that most of the time Muslim who is living in India, they are getting support from the Gulf countries and monetary support, financial support, and many Muslims are also settled in these Gulf countries and Dubai and other countries, and even in like in neighboring Muslim countries, and they are earning much. So it is also true, and that is just paranoia which has helped them. They helped to like change their revivalist cult. And there was a time also even you see, Muslim were very close to RSS in 1925 when RSS was formed. When Muslim demanded separate electorate, and Congress did not even Jawaharlal Nehru during that point of time did not even pay heed to it. They separated from Congress, Muslim community separated from Congress and joined RSS and Hindu Mahasabha. They joined Hindu Mahasabha at that point of time. Again, by 1927, you get to see that kind of resurrection of their alliances, and Hindu and Muslim, and then Muslim community joined in Congress. So it's not like that. So this revivalist culture will not accommodate the Muslims. So it is all based on politics. You get to see. When you talk about communalism also, communalism, you see this religion, whether politics has accentuated communalism or religion has accentuated communalism. It is what politics accentuated the communalism. Politicians actually taking help of religious identity, religious differences to create a division among the communities for their own interest. So, communalism has characterized by political interest and economic interest. It is not characterized by religious interest. Okay, so it is very, very important to understand this communalism here in India in terms of nationalism also, because here in India, communalism is characterized by this, you see, um, um, by leadership type. Leaders are always there in a hillside. A leadership, their degree of violence it is carried out, and also degree of cohesion, which is very very important to understand. Okay, and we get to see that it is often characterized by the political motive and also economic motive. Economic motive is there, and economic cause is also there. So these are two important factors to understand communalism. And also you get to see that in a country, in a state or region when communal riot has already taken place or have riot has taken place or any has already erupted, there is a chance of communal riot again breaking down in the same region or erupting in the same region. So that was also a tendency. And you also see there is also ascendancy of using arms in communal rights. Huh. And media has a role even at that, by discussing about the nationalism role of media in national movement and the role of media in accentuating the communal sentiment. It is there. You know about the Sebak in 1968 Sebak, that was that was basically a communal newspaper. Sebak, Akali Patrika, this Marnik organizers. These are some of the communal newspapers. These are not banned, but they have actually 1969. It is also they protest story expressed that Muslim women were stripped by women, Hindu women are stripped by Muslim people, like that when raped by Muslim people, and that has created a communal riot. In the very next day, they have also corrected the statement, but it was too late by then because riot has already erupted. You see, so the role of media at that point of time in encouraging the communal sentiment. And all this, like Akali Patrika, you see, organizers, these are some of this, like, this mouthpiece of even this communal organization. Okay, and the Marmik, Subat is there. So these are some of these mouthpiece. They are spreading this hatred among the communities, and that too for their political interest. Not only the vote bank is basic interest, but also other political, opportunities to get more representation in their constituencies, as well as get more opportunity in terms of education. Can you relate here? What? The ones who you just named, and the ones who spread hatred. Sobat, Marmik, Sebak, Akali Patrika, organizer. There you get to find the story. So I'll take a class on representation, media representation, and the hate politics. So that I'm going to take a class there. I will be discussing about this role of media and representation of those communities in the media. So which is very, very important. But before that, I will want you to understand the nationalism. So these are basically, they are spreading the hatred, and also history textbook are also spreading hatred. The way they cover an incident, most of the time, they Indian historian also mentioned Muhammad Ghazali and even Muhammad bin Tughlaq Aurangzeb as one who who is anti-Hindu, who are anti-Hindu because they destroyed temple and destroyed the Hindu traditions. But the pro-Hindu character is not highlighted. So we get to see pro-Hindu character only in the face of only in the name of and the form of you see Akbar this one. But at the same time, and Muslim textbooks are also there. Pakistan, they are used to spreading the hate, simply saying and then Sibaji and all are kafir. And but the way Sibaji is being portrayed is also quite you see communal, because Sibaji is one who is against the Muslim. The way he is being portrayed. Any person, any political figure, being portrayed in such a way that he is communal. Sibaji is communal. I don't think that. No, they're not. But that is being portrayed by most of these newspapers.
In Indian education, in NCERT, there is a thing like these figures have not been talked about. Shivaji Rao, Rana Pratap, they are not in NCERT that much. We know all about nationalism in Europe, nationalism in Europe,
but people should know without even but yeah, earlier it was there. Syllabus has been changed, it was there, and it is not about in case of textbook, So there are.
That is thing when we are not being taught about our freedom figures, so that becomes a problem later on.
That is a kind of ignorance. Yeah, ignorance has been created.
I have read this somewhere that the reason why we get to read about Mughal leaders so much in our history textbook is because we have a lot of information about Mughal history. It's right before modern history started. So when we go backwards, the information we have decreases. So that's why we don't have detailed information about the ancient history.
Right.
But in case of European history, we have a lot of information. Mughal leaders ne kaha kya kiya hai.
Even Mughal history we have information.
Even if we say this, we don't know about Shivaji or Maharana Pratap Singh or the Hindu leaders, but somewhere we did study about them. Maybe not in the history textbook, but somewhere
throughout the education system.
There was this publication called Amar Chitrakatha.
Amar Chitrakatha,
the comics.
It's a liberal one.
Indian mythology, like I read about Chhatrapati Shivaji in Amar Chitrakatha novel. Because I guess it was in school days. I have seen they cover almost
every aspect.
Each and every.
That is the difference. What should be taught in Indian education is being taught in comics. That's what I'm trying to say. Because if you are teaching about nationalism of other countries,
right.
There was a chapter 9 class nationalism in India, but these things were not taught there.
Right.
So this should be inculcated in a right way, so that it does not become a propaganda.
That is one thing.
Like we are studying this in class right now, whatever we are learning, it That's why these things should be taught in a
This should
proper.
be, yeah, yeah. That's what we talk about revival of this cultural, like traditions and cultural revivalism. And you see, when you talk about this Hindu revivalism and cultural revivalism, this is not something which has culminated now or it's a recent phenomenon. It is a phenomenon of the past. During this freedom struggle, also Rabindranath Tagore, he actually toured to India, toured the country, and he collected the ballads, he collected the hymns, he collected all those poetries the same time, and from the folk and from you see this communities who are not even rich, and collected it and created a tradition of the folklore to show that we have a rich tradition, because British taught that Indians are incapable of governing. Indians are very named incapable of governing, so it's no point giving them the right and authority to govern. So we had to prove that we have a rich culture, we have an ancient past, we have a very rich ancient past and a history and civilization, and national leaders as well as patriotic leaders at that point of time, they focused on that folklore, and also some of these images and iconography dominated. These are part of this strategy of the nationalistic leader in order to create nationalistic sentiment. One is Bharat Mata. Bharat Mata, that if you actually get to see the original Bharat Mata pictures, it was just like you actually see that was a that was created by Abnani Abnanindra Thakur. Yeah, Abnanindra Nath Thakur. Abnanindra Thakur. That's Tagore, we say. That is that Abnanindranath Tagore has created that original Bharat Mata. That I forgot the year, I think 1935 or something. He has created that picture. Okay, that Bharat Mata is a one who is a bestower of the education, that also that Anna and shelter, as well as you see this seems very calm, composed, and essay like that way. So that is like one cult of Bharat Mata. You get to see, Google it out, Abhinandanand Tagore. That was the first picture created about the Bharat Mata to even the create create a sentiment of nationalism, to favor the sentiment of nationalism. Now we have different picture of Bharat Mata. One Mata is also, you see, standing along with the Trikul, and sharing a space with elephant, as well as you see that lion. At the same time, so the power of shows her power and authority. So that is the first picture created to create that was to even cement the sentiment of nationalism, that Bharat Mata. Bande Mataram was also written during that period of time. So Bande Mataram written in 1870, and then Ananda Math of Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay, that was also embraced by Indian Math. So that has created that nationalistic sentiment at the same time. Okay, so in that way, we see different strategies were employed by these national leaders to create that nationalistic sentiment. And now also this has been carried out. Now you see, if you get to see the shift in nationalism, this Bharat Mata component is still there. Okay, so but the thing is that Bharat Mata component is there, Vande Mataram component is there, but this revivalist culture won't focus primarily on you see, the multiple sect in India. They focus only on Vande Mataram. If you are saying Vande Mataram, you are Hindi. If you are saying Jai Shri Ram, you are Hindi. Okay, like you are Hindu. If you are saying like Bharat Mata, you are Hindu. But there are also multiple sects in India. There are multiple religions are there in India. Okay, and they do have different practice. So Hinduism itself is a culture. It's not a religion. Okay, it's a practice. It's a way of life. It's also said in Hinduism a way of life. So Hinduism, you are a Hindu, which should not be limited saying Vande Mataram, saying Jai Sri Ram. Okay, and at the same time, you see many people who believe in Saivism don't even prefer to follow Ram, and Ram has also got different version, and one version will always cast Ram as a hero, another version also cast Ram as a villain. Okay, So you get to see these are the sect, different kind of sects and multiple sects living in India try to like give us a detailed understanding of Hinduism. So, but it is continued because of that paranoia and Hindu revivalism, which now we are getting, is a complete form of it's a different one because of the paranoia, because of the narrow-mindedness, because of this you say parochial tendencies which we get to see among them, and that has actually fostered this communal sentiment. Okay, so when you say understand this communalism here, and in terms of religion, we get to see some of the element which is social, the social tradition, dogmatic tradition, which has actually culminated this communalism and associated with even a part of like nationalism now, new form of nationalism and dogmatism, hope of the people. Then various you see religious practices which are also available at times. Political, religious based political organizations, when we talk about canvassing of this election, canvassing of election on the basis of religion, and also politicians will try to like create a vociferous tendency in the name of religion, are some of the political factors. We have economic factors when there is also discriminations that has also led to these tendencies. Okay, economic factors which are also there lead to create a communal, you see, that will create a kind of communal discrepancies. Communal you see this, that is a that not only discriminations but also there is a kind of lopsided development of the state. Huh. So these are also part of nationalism nowadays. And this lopsided, when you talk about lopsided development of the state, has resulted in a sentiment of regionalism. You see. That has resulted a sentiment of regionalism at the same time. So, in the one hand, we study actually this economic disparities. We also study the regionalism, and regionalism that has started right from these partitions, and we will also focus on the state reorganization bill, which is very very important to understand, as well as we focus on the the various kind of demands on the basis of linguistic grounds, but that is entirely on the basis of the grievances, on the basis of disparities, on the basis of deprivation of the communities for which they are looking for a separate region. Again, it is also based on their sentiment, that is sentiment and committed to a particular identity, committed to a particular nation and the place and the belongingness, which has created a communal sentiment and even regionalism. Okay, this fine. Anything else if you have? So in the last class we have discussed about evolution of the nation state. So this is fine. And today, what is important is the factor. Whatever we have discussed is related to factor, which is also responsible for this rise of nationalism in India. There is a shift of nationalism in India, which is important. So more, all of you actually understand the nature of nationalism now in India. And but the thing is that what is no what
India's nationalism, ethnic and
It's hyper-nationalism.
yeah
ultra.
it's ultra
Hyper-nationalism
ultra
is
high.
different from ultra, right?
Or mythical
You
nationalism.
cannot even say hyper ultra
Hyper-nationalism in
nationalistic.
terms of collectiveness, like doing this will make you belong in this sense of belonging.
We cannot say that we have an ultra nationalism
No one is saying,
because
like,
when
we're
you say
not
ultra
talking-
nationalistic sentiment focuses on the that extreme form of nationalism. Bank nationalization, there is no foreign investment, and there is no free trade, there is no liberal
I
policy.
did not say ultra, I said
Okay, so it is not ultra. Hyper, no, it's a
and
hybrid
that
form
too,
of.
it's like
It's
emerging, it's
actually a
not
hybrid form of nationalism. We do have hybrid, where we get to see fomenting of Muslim communalism is also there. there are Hindu communalism, even Christian communalism. Okay, at the same time, new cult of Hindu revivalism in the form of communalism.
I feel like when communalism is like food for Indian people. They feed on that because
Yeah, it is
it's
true.
not in just in
Yeah,
India.
it's
If you
true.
follow geopolitical news, it's everywhere communism. In India, it's in terms of religion, but everywhere else in
So
America,
that's why
there's
I
white
have told you.
supremacy.
Yeah.
In America, there's white supremacy issue.
Yeah.
The
So
way
yeah, it is there. So, but the thing is that communalism is interpreted differently, as I've already told you. So, West interpreted communalism in terms of autonomy to local authorities in a federation. So it is not related to the parochial sentiment. So we define communalism in terms of parochial sentiment of the groups. Parochial sentiment and on the basis of ethnicity. So our communalism here is on the basis of ascriptive identities, parochial sentiment, narrow-mindedness, and also at the same time communal ownership of goods and services. So you see, that is what communalism and how communalism we define. But we won't get to see that kind of communalism in the West. This is true. And when you say communal ownership of goods and services, it's very, very important. Communal ownership of goods and services, it is there. Even mm, we say in terms of Akali Subha, in the like in this, Akali but sorry that Akali Dal political Subha. Okay, that Subha, the separate Subha means a separate state. And in the last class, if I have mentioned about SGPC, Siromani, that Guru,
currently there's
yeah, that Prabandhak Samiti is there, Gurudwara Prabandhak Samiti, that was constituted in 1920. And that was constituted in order to have a control over the Gurudwaras. And Gurudwaras are full of wealth, properties, and affluences.
I mean, same with
So,
every
so in a way, no, that is in order to have a control over the properties that properties belonging to one particular community. They want a separate state and they
That
want
is
to
wrong.
contest the election.
But that is wrong. Whatever is happening right now in Punjab is wrong. The way
No, it happened in
like it happened in
1920.
1928 also.
Now it is not happening.
I am talking about the current news, like the demand for separate state in Punjab.
That is correct.
In UK, they are tearing down the Indian flag near the embassy. That is all wrong. We should not do that.
Yeah.
The separatists.
So one, this separatism is there because of like again that economic issue, economic.
It's
That
not
is the
economics, even their extremists in Punjab, whatever. Like the Punjab government themselves are not supporting that cause. They're saying it's not reflecting good on the state. And it's disrupting the bilateral ties between UK and India because the UK administration there is not taking any action against the separatists who are in UK.
No, but the thing is, why it is happening? You say everywhere people are demanding separate state, separate regime. What is the reason? Just
The
because
reason-
they want to access the right, constitutional
And there's
right.
also this,
Most of the time,
this thing called
they're getting that autonomy, getting more and more autonomy in a federation.
if you remember Operation Blue Star when it happened during Indira Gandhi regime, for which he was killed later. So a lot of Pakistani insurgency had a role to play if you read about it.
Right.
Similarly, right now it's happening. Like Pakistan is using this as an opportunity to surge insurgency in Punjab. Not saying like it's their role because in Punjab the youth it's either in peasantry because Punjab is still agriculture-based economy or either in substance abuse. So it has that element like militancy element and whatever the demand for separate state and all, the whole of Punjab does not need that. That's the difference. The whole of Punjab is not asking that. It's just certain elements that are asking.
That is the element of study. You see, what we want to study is whether these demands can be granted or not. That is one point of time. And this demand for separate state or secessionist movement or a separate region has been there since partition. Okay, and that is one part of nationalism on the basis of separate identity. They want to create a separate identity because there are multiple sect, multiple religion, multiple language communities are there. They wanted to have separate provinces where they could preserve their culture as well as traditions. And Punjab demanded it because they do have that Gurumukhi cult. Gurumukhi script is there. Their script is also Gurumukhi. Literature is Gurumukhi. Gurumukhi tradition. So they wanted a separate province where they could preserve that Gurumukhi culture and Gurumukhi traditions. And once you also see that Muslim communities, Punjabi communities, Hindu communities live together in united Punjab. So in before partition, we had an united Punjab. In united Punjab, three communities lived together, and Hindus constituted this majority in united Punjab. And then now, after division, after partition of united Punjab, part of the Punjab was taken by Pakistan. Then Hindus constitute a majority of 70%. Punjabi, which constitute a minority in united Punjab, only 13%, and now it become sort of like a majority in Punjab. It was constituting 13%, and Muslim become a microscopic minority because Muslim who were living in Punjab, united Punjab, already left for Pakistan. Okay, so you get to see it was the status of Punjab just after the partition and during the time of independence. And that point of time, it is that Gopi Chand um, government, no, already declared Punjab as a bilingual state. Like there are Hindu-dominated areas in a Punjab, Hindu majority, and Punjab-dominated areas. So it's a bilingual state that that language can be opted for official purpose even in school. Now, why there is a demand for separate state is that in order to like mitigate their economic interest, meet their economic interest, meet their even needs which are non-religious. So they are using religious to masking the non-religious social needs, social opportunities, their even political interest, economic interest. They want to get representation in assembly, better representation, want to get a job, fully recruit employment opportunities and educational opportunities, and make use of the resources in optimal way. So that was the region they are actually looking for, and all these communities are looking for autonomy within the federation, and that was a part of communalism. So communalism defined by West. So the way we define communalism is different. They are looking for an autonomy, local autonomy within a federation. Okay, not a separate state as such. Okay, so separate means succession from India.
The means through which they are trying to get the autonomy are not right. That's what I'm saying. The means.
That means is religious. So religion is
not
an
religious.
Instrument. Religion, most of the time they're using the religious differences, and religion is an instrument in order to demand this autonomy.
And even if they use religion, it's okay. If it's peaceful, the means themselves are not peaceful.
No, religion is not peaceful. Who was saying
I'm
that?
not saying religion is peaceful. I'm saying even if they're using religion
religious
as an altar for protest and mobilization, that is also justified, but that is also not peaceful. Their way of protesting, their way of demand.
That's why you see when you understand communalism, communalism is a part of nationalism in India, and in order to understand the character of communalism, you need to understand this leadership style, because it is associated. Leaders are associated. Degree of cohesion, mass mobilization, the violence is a part of communalism, and there is an increase in ascendancy of arm adoption in communalism. Arms and all this immunities they adopted in communalism. So this is an evil for us at the same time, but how we look at it, that is also one thing, and we need very strong administrators and decommunalize the civil society at the same time. Decommunalize the civil society, decommunalize the space, that educational institution, even the state and government, overtly or covertly, are supporting communism. Is supposed to be state government is also decommunalized and they check the communalism among them. So that is one thing. In that way, perhaps it can be curbed, but the thing is that it is even impossible at the same time, because it is a defining feature of Indian nationalism. Same time, and in Punjab, why this Punjab is again in case of Nagaland, that is also one thing. That is based on ethnicity again. Okay, it is still that demand has been carried out. Okay, so talk about the Punjab at the same time. Punjab become an Hindu-speaking state of Haryana and Punjabi-speaking state of Punjab that came in 1966. And hill Punjab, hill areas of Punjab is integrated with Himachal Pradesh. So it was a very big region, you see. But the thing is that resources were not distributed. That is also true. And most of the time, that Punjabi people face discrimination Punjabi people face discrimination in educational institutions, and they also interpret various move of even government um, as it is against them. Whatever move government has taken in terms of, like, that is, first government has taken that official language policy, that Hindi official language policy, that was also move against this Punjabi people. They have interpreted in that way. Okay, so that is one thing, one regions most of the time how you look at it. Even in Tamil, you get to see Bharat Mata, that the kind of that image of Bharat Mata was demonized. We talk about the Abanindranath Tagore's Bharat Mata image. It was much talked about nowadays, although it is now, you see, refurbished. That image is being refurbished, but always this image is being used to identify nationalism, our nationalistic sentiment, right? But you see, at the same time, Punjab, again, in Tamil, there is a Tamilatti, another Bharat Mata is being created, and this Bharat Mata is being demonized as like as denigratory language, like on whore and whatever they have started. They created two versions. One is Tamilatti, that is Bharat Mata, their Mata, who is the accent and symbol of all kind of nurture and all, and the Bharat Mata, which is created and which we are now following, um, is the one who is evil. So like that way, evil and kind of wrong. So that kind of polarization has been created, and it is there. Up versus down kind of polarization, bipolarity is there, and that is a part of representational politics. Okay, when you talk about the polarization, you talk about this deprivation based on social barrier theory, based on cluster theory. There are some theories so in sociology. So you actually study the polarization effect, and that will help you to study this communalism at the same time. And you also get to see that it has accentuated communalistic sentiment, but not nationalistic sentiment. But at the same time, you also cannot, like, go kill people and force them to say, okay, you say Bande Mataram, see Jai Ram, and you will become a nationalist. So you cannot do that at the same time in the name of Hindu revivalism. So you cannot force anyone to, like, to go and banning the cow slaughter. And some of it is very, very important to understand, because it is based on like discussion also, the kind of, like, topic I have taken. So I actually need lot of participation, because it is not going to end in one session. It will continue and continue, because you see, the nationalism is something which is very, very debating topic nowadays in India. And at the same time, it is also very important to understand different facets of it. No, so it is a debatable topic, and in one class and simply become a monologue is very difficult even to understand. So you can contribute your opinion does matter. So regarding nationalism, how you look into it, and it should not be based on simple literature. Some of the literature you have read, you have found it. Okay, so we need to have some of the, like, deliberation on this term, what is all about, what nationalism is all about, like how different, like, that turn and twist uh, have developed and incorporated into it. So it's important. Okay. Um, Anything else?